The first snow of the season fell heavy on the mountains of northern Montana, blanketing the valley where Marcus Webb had built his cabin 3 years ago. He stood at the window, watching the fat flakes descend in silence, a mug of black coffee warming his calloused hands. Outside, the woods were pristine, untouched except for the thin line of smoke rising from his chimney, a short, stubby structure that barely cleared the roofline by 2 feet. Marcus had built everything himself. The cabin sat on 40 acres his grandfather left him, far from the nearest town, deep in timber country where cell service was a myth and neighbors were separated by miles of forest. He had spent 2 summers cutting logs, fitting joints, laying stone for the foundation. Every board, every nail, every decision had been his, including the chimney. He designed it short on purpose. The logic was simple. Less pipe meant less surface area for creosote buildup, easier maintenance, better draft control. He had read about it in an old handbook from the 1950s, written by a fire captain in Alaska. Short and efficient, the man had written, "Let physics do the work." But when the other cabin owners started arriving for the season, the comments began. Tom Richter was the first. He pulled up in his new Ford truck, surveying the property from behind expensive sunglasses. His own cabin sat a quarter-mile west, a sprawling log mansion with a stone chimney that rose a good 15 feet above the roof peak, crowned with a copper cap that gleamed in the sun. "Your flue's looking a little short there, buddy," Tom said with a grin that did not reach his eyes. "You planning on finishing that or leaving it like a stump?" Marcus did not look up from stacking firewood. "It's done." Tom laughed, sharp and dismissive. "That thing won't draw right. You'll smoke yourself out by November. Trust me, I've been building cabins longer than you've been alive." Marcus was 32. Tom was maybe 50, but he had money, connections, and a loud voice at the quarterly land association meetings. Within a week, the whole valley knew about Marcus's chimney. At the October meeting, held in the community lodge near the main road, Marcus sat in the back row while Tom held court at the front. He gestured broadly, describing the importance of proper chimney height, citing building codes and anecdotal evidence from his contractor buddies in Bozeman. When someone asked if Marcus's cabin would be a fire hazard, Tom shrugged theatrically. "I'm just saying, the man built a chimney like a cigar stub. We all have properties out here. One mistake can burn down half the valley." Laughter rippled through the room. Marcus felt the weight of 30 pairs of eyes on him. He said nothing. He never did. Words were not his strength. Building was. By mid-November, the temperatures dropped hard. The valley settled into the kind of cold that made breath freeze in your lungs. Marcus kept his fire steady, burning seasoned pine and spruce, the short chimney pulling smoke up and out with a clean, strong draft. No buildup, no backdraft, no smoke curling into the cabin. Just heat and the soft crackle of burning wood. Meanwhile, the other cabins began having problems. Tom's 15-foot chimney iced over during the first hard freeze. The moisture from the smoke condensed in the long flue, froze solid, and blocked the vent. Smoke poured back into his living room at 2 in the morning, setting off alarms and sending his wife into a panic. He spent the next day on the roof with a blowtorch, cursing and chipping away ice while Marcus watched from a distance, saying nothing. The Harrisons, who lived north of Tom, had the same issue. So did the Caldwells. And the Morenos. One by one, the tall, elegant chimneys that had been praised all autumn became frozen monuments to poor planning. The taller the flue, the colder it got at the top, the faster the ice formed. Marcus's short chimney stayed clear. The heat reached the top too fast for condensation. The smoke vented clean every time. By December, people stopped laughing. The December Land Association meeting had a different energy. The lodge was colder than usual, the heating system struggling against the brutal winds that whipped down from the mountains. Marcus arrived early, taking the same seat in the back, his coat still dusted with snow from the walk-in. Tom arrived 20 minutes late, stomping his boots loudly at the entrance. His face was red, not from cold but from something deeper. Frustration, maybe. Embarrassment, definitely. He did not look at Marcus as he made his way to the front. The meeting started with routine business. Road maintenance, snow removal schedules, a debate about propane delivery routes. Then Tom cleared his throat and stood up. "I want to address something that's been on my mind," he said, his voice carrying that familiar authority. "We've had a rough start to winter, a lot of chimney issues, and I think we need to talk about standards." Marcus felt the room shift. Several people glanced back at him. Tom continued, "Now, I'm not pointing fingers, but when you have one cabin doing things differently, it raises questions. We all followed the recommended guidelines. We built our chimneys to code, to proper height. And yeah, we've had some problems. But that doesn't mean the solution is to cut corners and hope for the best." Janet Moreno, whose own chimney had iced over twice already, raised her hand. "But Tom, Marcus's chimney is the only one that hasn't had issues." Tom's jaw tightened. "That's luck. Pure luck. You can't engineer a chimney based on one winter. What happens when conditions change? What happens when the wind shifts, or the wood burns hotter, or—" "It's not luck," a voice interrupted. Everyone turned. Marcus was standing. He rarely spoke at meetings. When he did, people listened, if only because it was so unusual. "It's physics," Marcus said quietly. "Short flue means faster heat to the top. Less condensation. Less ice. I read about it. I tested it. It works." Tom's face flushed darker. "You read about it? In what, some old manual? You think you know better than licensed contractors? Better than engineers who've been doing this for decades? I think I know what works on my property." Tom stepped forward, his voice rising. "Your arrogance is going to get someone killed. One spark, one backdraft, one mistake, and this whole valley burns. And when it does, it's on you." The room went silent. Marcus could feel the weight of the accusation, the anger, the contempt. Tom was not just criticizing his chimney anymore. He was questioning his judgment, his competence, his right to be there. Marcus sat back down without another word. His hands were steady, but his chest felt tight. Outside, the snow continued to fall. 2 days after the meeting, Marcus was splitting wood behind his cabin when he heard the truck. He recognized the engine before he saw it. A deep rumble that belonged to Dale Pritchard, the oldest resident in the valley. Dale had lived there for 40 years, long before the wealthy newcomers arrived with their architect-designed cabins and luxury fixtures. The truck stopped near the woodpile. Dale climbed out slowly, his movements careful in the cold. He was 76, white-haired, with hands that still knew how to work. "Marcus," Dale called out. "Got a minute?" Marcus set down the axe and walked over. Dale was not one for small talk, so if he drove out here, it mattered. Dale looked at the cabin, then at the short chimney with its steady line of smoke. "Heard what Tom said at the meeting. Wanted to see this set up for myself." Marcus nodded but said nothing. Dale walked around the cabin, examining the chimney from different angles. He crouched near the foundation, checked the clearance, studied the draft. Finally, he straightened up and looked Marcus in the eye. "Your grandfather would be proud," Dale said. "He built the same way. Smart, simple, effective." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Dale continued, "Tom Richter's got money and volume, but he doesn't have sense. That 15-foot chimney of his is a disaster waiting to happen every winter. Yours? It's engineered right. Old school right." He paused, glancing back at the thin smoke rising clean into the gray sky. "People are watching now," Dale said. "They won't admit it yet, but they're watching. When the rest of those tall chimneys freeze up again, and they will, your short one's going to be the only thing standing. That's when the story changes." Marcus looked at the old man, uncertain what to say. "You built something that works," Dale said firmly. "Don't let loud voices make you doubt that." After Dale left, Marcus stood in the cold for a long time, watching the smoke rise. For 3 years he had worked alone, trusted his instincts, followed the logic of the old handbook. He had been mocked, dismissed, accused. But now, for the first time, someone who mattered had looked at his work and called it right. The next morning, Marcus decided to document everything. He started taking notes, temperatures, draft measurements, wood consumption, burn times. If people were going to question him, he would have answers. Real answers. Not opinions. Not guesses. Data. If you're pulling for Marcus right now, take a moment and stay with this story. The real shift is just beginning, and what happens next will prove that sometimes the quietest voice in the room knows exactly what it's doing. The valley was about to learn that the hard way. January brought the coldest stretch Montana had seen in 15 years. The thermometer outside Marcus's cabin read -18 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 straight days. The kind of cold that split tree trunks and turned exposed skin numb in minutes. The tall chimneys failed one after another. Tom's chimney iced over completely on January 9th. This time, the blowtorch was not enough. He had to call a crew from Kalispell to dismantle the top section and rebuild it with heating elements wrapped inside the Flue. The bill came to $4,200. The Harrisons abandoned their cabin entirely and went back to Seattle until spring. The Caldwells hired someone to install a secondary venting system. The Morenos just stopped using their fireplace and ran electric heaters that drained their generator dry every 3 days. Marcus kept his fire burning steady. Morning, noon, and night. The short chimney pulled clean every single time. People started stopping by. At first, they came with excuses. Janet Moreno showed up asking to borrow a splitting maul. Greg Caldwell claimed he was checking property lines. But they all ended up standing near Marcus's cabin, watching the smoke rise, asking quiet questions about his design. Marcus showed them his notes. He explained the physics without arrogance. Just facts. Short flue equals faster exhaust velocity. Less time for moisture to condense. Less ice buildup. Simple. By mid-January, word spread beyond the valley. A journalist from the Billings Gazette heard about the chimney wars and drove out to interview residents. She spoke to Tom first, who downplayed the problems and insisted that his contractor had simply miscalculated insulation needs. Then she spoke to Dale, who told her the truth. "There's a young man up here who built it right from the start," Dale said. While everyone else was worried about aesthetics and status, he was worried about function. That's the difference. The article ran on January 23rd. The headline read, "Old Wisdom Outsmarts Modern Design in Montana Cabin Dispute." Tom saw it at the grocery store in town. His face went pale as he read the piece, which quoted several Valley residents praising Marcus's short chimney and questioning why the expensive, code-compliant designs had failed so spectacularly. That night, Tom drove to Marcus's cabin. He sat in his truck for a full 5 minutes before getting out. When he finally knocked on the door, Marcus answered with a dish towel in his hand, midway through cleaning up dinner. Tom stood there, shoulders tight, jaw working like he was chewing gravel. "I need to know how you did it," Tom said finally. "No games. No pride. I need to fix mine before next winter, and I can't afford another disaster." Marcus studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in. I'll show you." Marcus spread the old handbook across his kitchen table, its pages yellowed and worn from years of use. Tom stood across from him, arms crossed at first, then slowly relaxing as Marcus walked him through the principles. "It's not about breaking code," Marcus explained. "It's about understanding what the code is trying to accomplish and adapting it to the environment. Montana winters are different than what most building standards account for. The moisture, the extreme cold, the sustained low temperatures, they create conditions that tall chimneys can't handle." Tom leaned in, studying the diagrams. "So the height recommendations are based on draft strength in moderate climates." "Exactly. But draft isn't the problem here. Ice is. And the taller your flue, the more surface area you give that moisture to freeze on." Tom ran a hand through his hair. "I spent $18,000 on that chimney. Custom stonework. Copper cap. Everyone told me it was the best money could buy. Probably was in a different place. Just not here." For a long moment, Tom said nothing. Then he looked up, and something had changed in his face. The arrogance was gone. What was left looked almost like respect. "I was wrong about you," Tom said quietly. "At the meeting, what I said, that was out of line." Marcus nodded once. Apology accepted. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus helped Tom redesign his chimney. They shortened the flue, added better insulation at the base, adjusted the cap to allow faster heat escape. Tom paid for all the materials and labor, but he insisted Marcus supervise the work. When it was done, Tom's chimney drew clean for the first time all winter. Word spread fast. By February, Marcus had requests from 8 other cabin owners. He did not charge for consultations, just asked that people buy him a tank of gas if they had to drive far. Some insisted on paying more. He refused every time. The February Land Association meeting was different. When Marcus walked in, people nodded. Some even smiled. Tom stood up halfway through and made an announcement. I want to publicly acknowledge that Marcus Webb was right about chimney design, and the rest of us were wrong. He built smart, and instead of listening, we criticized. I think we owe him our thanks, and more importantly, our respect. The room erupted in applause. Marcus felt his face flush. He was not used to this kind of attention. But as he looked around the room, at Janet, at Greg, at Dale in the front row nodding with quiet pride, he realized something had shifted. He was no longer the outsider, no longer the guy who did things wrong. He was the guy who did things right. That night, back at his cabin, Marcus stood outside and looked up at his short chimney. Smoke rose steady into the clear winter sky, disappearing into the stars. Simple, effective, proven. 3 years later, Marcus stood in the same spot behind his cabin. But the valley looked different now. Where there had once been only a handful of homes scattered through the forest, there were now 23 cabins, and every single one had a short chimney. The design had become standard. When new owners applied for building permits, the county now included a recommended flue height specifically for high-altitude, extreme cold environments. The guideline was based on Marcus's original measurements, the data he had collected during that brutal first winter. Dale had passed away the previous spring, peacefully in his sleep at 79. At the funeral, his daughter handed Marcus an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on yellowed paper. Marcus, you reminded me why I moved to this valley 50 years ago. Not for status or money, but to build something real with my own hands and live by what works, not what looks good. Keep building. Keep thinking. The world needs more people like you. Dale. Marcus kept the note folded in his wallet. Tom Richter had become an unlikely friend. They met for coffee in town once a month, talking about construction, weather patterns, and the endless challenges of mountain living. Tom's pride had been replaced by curiosity. He asked questions now instead of making pronouncements. Last fall, he had even helped Marcus build a new shed, working side by side without a single word about who knew better. The valley had changed Marcus too. He was no longer the silent man in the back row. People sought his advice on everything from foundation work to solar panel placement. He had started teaching a weekend workshop at the community lodge, showing newcomers how to build for Montana's unique conditions. The classes filled up months in advance. But the cabin itself remained the same. Simple. Functional. The short chimney still rose just 2 feet above the roofline. Still drew clean and strong every winter. Still stood as proof that the quietest answer is sometimes the right one. On this particular morning, Marcus watched smoke curl up into the crisp autumn air and smiled. The first snow was coming soon. He could feel it in the wind. And when it arrived, his fire would burn steady, just like always. Sometimes the best way to prove yourself is not by shouting louder than everyone else. It's by building something that works and letting time do the talking. Thank you for staying with Marcus's story all the way to the end. If this one moved you, hit that like button and drop a comment below telling me what you thought. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because there are so many more stories like this one waiting to be told. Real struggles, real perseverance, real victories. What kind of story do you want to hear next? Let me know in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.